Welcome, Automating Success guests. I am here with Dave with Infinity Robotics today. Dave, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, first, last name, everything about your company, and then I'll get into why I'm so excited. But first, let everybody know who you are.
Hi, Joe, Dave Neville. I'm with Infinity Robotics. We are a robot integrator. We take heavy industrial robots, we tie that together with various machines, and we automate processes for our customers. Our ultimate goal is to build robots here, learn as much as we can. The goal is to send these robots out into outer space and mine the asteroid field. So we have, our slogan is change the way we live on and off this planet. And we hope that through using automation, we can get people into safer, better, smarter jobs.
Now that is awesome. See, this is why I let people like you say what you do, because if I took the research I did in a bio, I would have so undersold that. And I'll tell you just blew me away. You just made me think of a sci-fi movie, The Expanse. I've been watching the show The Expanse, and it's all about what you just said, mining from outer space and bringing it back. So that's crazy. So, all right. So obviously, everybody I bring on, I want them to be passionate, right? I'm a very passionate person. I can see that passion through this screen and this link we call Zoom, right? But what got you into robotics? How do you sit here today? Because we all have a story that got us here. I want to hear that story.
It was an incredibly long journey. I would guess it was roughly about 7 years old. I really wanted an erector set. And I wanted an erector set so I could build a robot arm. And thank my godmother, Barb. She found me an erector set at a garage sale. I got to play with it. I built with the pieces I could, the arm I could. Fast forward to high school, mid-'80s. Don't mean to date myself so much, but I had an electronics teacher who knew how to go get grants, and he bought a Heathkit Hero 2000 robotic kit. And back then that was a $6,000 kit, which might as well been $1 million at the time. My job was to assemble the arm. And this was a mobile robot with an arm attached. It did the optical scanner on the floor. It had a sonar scanner to detect people. And that kind of ignited a little bit of my passion in electronics and robotics. Weirdly, took me about 35 years to really probably get into the industry. I became a headhunter for mathematicians and double E's, people designing jets and medical devices and anything electronic software related. I spent about 20 years putting people into that industry, realizing that, man, these cameras, these chips, everything's speeding up from what I was working in the 80s. And they're finally at that point where we should start bolting some of this hardware I've been selling to the military onto robots and bring it into industry. So around 2009, I decided I wanted to learn manufacturing. So I built a weapons company called Kuhn & Inc., and we made 1911 357 Magnum firearms. Motivation for that was I could buy a bunch of CNC machines to start building my own drives for my own robotic systems. Well, Trump administration came along, wasn't as good of a salesperson as Obama was. And I kind of exited that industry and decided to go into robotics more as a full-time career. Went to work for a company. I was the first real salesperson in 60 years they'd hired. It turns out I'm a little bit more obnoxious than they were ready to handle. Left that company. Some of my coworkers, contacted me and said, "Hey, go start your own robot company. You have a vision. You know what kind of technology is out there, and I think we think you can pull this together." So they helped me pull together some funding. I approached some friends who owned a company called Automated Control Systems. They were doing fixed automation for factories, and I said to my buddy, I said, "What do you think about shutting down what you're doing, starting up a new company and bolting on robots to what you do?" And let's face it, we're all 7 years old at heart. And the answer from all of us was, yes, let's go do it. Yeah. And so that was about 20 months ago. And that was the genesis of Infinity Robotics.
Wow, that's amazing. So first, I I guess a little off the subject, but go back to the manufacturing of the guns because I feel like every person would think Trump had to be great for that. Like, so explain to me why he wasn't. And I know this is like a little offshoot, but this is
Fair
interesting.
enough. So when you go to sell a firearm, fear is the best seller of a firearm. And the Obama administration, the good and bad that they accomplished, and I think they like everybody else, it was a mixed bag.
Yeah.
One of the drawbacks to Obama was he put a lot of fear in people, and people bought guns at rates that were not good. They weren't good for the manufacturers. I was 14 months back ordered from the first day I started, and I could never catch up. The day I caught up was the day Trump won the election. Nobody was worried the guns were going to be taken away, so they didn't purchase them as fast. So that's a little bit of the economics of the gun industry. Is Democratic administrations great for gun manufacturers, bad for society because it does proliferate way more guns on the streets than we probably really need. And we're talking about a guy who bought a gun company, so I'm not against him. I'm for owning, maintaining large sums of firearms, not insanely large sums of firearms. Is that fair?
Well, it sounds like you're okay with people purchasing their firearms legally, like we can in our Constitution that was written. Everything's all fine and good. I don't think any of us want them in the wrong hands. Nobody wants them in the wrong people's hands. But at the end of the day, I do totally get where you're coming from. And I think that's an interesting perspective because not to make the show political, because it very much isn't, but it's always cool to me to talk to somebody that has a unique perspective of the industry. Because like I said, from an outsider looking in, you'd think the opposite of what you said. So I wanted to undress it a little bit and say, okay, how could this be the case? We are not going to stay on it, but it's just interesting. It's an interesting conversation to be had. So, okay, so the good news is that it happened, and now you're using your mind for cool things like harvesting stuff from asteroids. So so now that being said, so everybody's got to like start from something and build. So like, what's your starting platform? Like as your company sits today, okay, what things are you bolting onto? Like explain that, kind of dive into that. Okay.
So the company we kind of built on was doing fixed automation for medical device and different commercials. So building a box and putting something in it and a process would happen and come out. A lot in the medical device, a lot of product development. What I liked about that is robots are part of automation, but they're a bolt on to what we've been building for literally a century. Conveyor belts, ovens, grinding centers, and what we're seeing now with the vision and AI is we can do more assembly type processes that aren't enjoyable for humans to do. We do everything from put drops of dye on medical devices so that they can detect things to automating the way that they build vials to build vaccines to bakeries making cookies. We do a lot of cookies and cheese. And in fact, we're just shipping a system today that is packaging student lunches, student breakfast kits for kids. So if they show up at school and need food, they can hand them one of these kits. It's a bowl of cereal, a juice box, a bag of crackers, some applesauce, and a spoon. Believe it or not, the hardest thing to put into a package is a spoon. They're very hard for the robot to singulate and find.
Yeah, because they're irregularly shaped. You probably have to like have a perfect lift so you don't break the spoon.
Don't worry so much about breaking. It's just finding that white spoon on a white belt, knowing where it's going to be. More than anything, it's just hard to get 2,000 spoons out of a box and get them to singulate and go down a conveyor belt so the robot can pick it.
So, that brings me to a point it's like I hear that and I think about the time and the resources put in to do that. And I'm a big advocate for the people that think that automation is killing jobs. And I always say it's actually making desirable jobs that are fun and cool. So it's like, I could see it being so rewarding to take this problem of, I can't figure out how to pick up the spoon. And there's a team of people constantly figuring out how to pick up the spoon. How cool of a job is that? To just
It's
say, we got to pick up the spoon. It's a lot cooler than packing student lunches by hand, repetitiously.
Yep. And I'll say, I think the days of replacing a person with a robot kind of, Detroit kind of did that, and that's come and gone to a degree. What we're seeing is we aren't replacing people, but we're putting people in jobs that weren't able to be filled. The last 3 sales call I've gone on have been very thumb intensive, pressing things in. And they tell me that the people start in the morning and never come back after lunch. Their thumb hurts so bad, they just can't do that job. So what our goal really is with robotics and automation is to take the human mind and put them into a role that's valuable. Running the robot, supplying the robot, fixing the problems, looking at the process, letting them use their minds more creatively, the way I think we're designed to. Now, there are people who just want to go in and they just want to put that spoon in a box. But normally when you give that person who's putting that spoon in the box the chance to learn how to jog a waypoint on the robot, reset after an incident, figure out better ways to supply the product to the robot, those are people, when we go back, they came in with, we walk in the factory, sullen looks on the face, we install the system, we walk back in, and the people there are happy. They're excited to show up for work. They got to learn a new skill. In fact, when we go into union shops, we not only train the union members that are involved in that system to use the robot, we actually open up the classes and the training to all of their members so that they all get a chance to learn this new skill and look at potentially a little bit of a right turn in their career into maybe hopefully a more satisfying environment.
Well, I want to add a safer environment. I mean,
and that's number 2. I'll tell you the number, it's pretty close between 1 and 2. Number 2 is we actually had a client, this is at a different company, $30 million robot. And we asked them what the ROI would be. And they said there's 0. We've hurt 35 employees and killed a bunch every year for the last 100 years. We want you to design this robot, we'll buy it, and we want you to figure out how to get the price down so you can give the technology away to our competitors so that they stop hurting their employees. That's one example of just robots being in the right position and taking over. Injuring people, that repetitive motion. This actual job was dangerous enough that people did actually lose limbs and occasionally died. And the family that owned this massive, massive company just told the board of directors, we are done. Solve this problem.
Yes. Well, and I think people don't realize how many things we use. I mean, when I was an electrician, I worked at an aerosol can company. They made aerosol cans. And when I was an electrician, I was doing a lot of the wiring, hooking up literally each wire to go to that robotic arm, kind of like how you said, it was stationary and would just move. But all it was doing was lifting sheet metal. It would take a piece of sheet metal and put it on the line. But they did it, to expand off what you're saying, because that metal is sharp, it's repetitive, and when you take the risk factor of cutting yourself on that, and the employee gets fatigued as the day goes on. So what happens when a human gets fatigued? We take shortcuts, bam, they cut themselves. Not good for anybody. And I don't think people realize how many things we consume every day that is very dangerous to set up. We just don't think twice about it, So no, I think it's great. And I'm so glad, that you're kind of going through that, because these are the important things for people to realize. And it is difficult for me selling outdoor automation because you get a lot of union feedback, but same thing, unions are about employee safety. When you think about why did unions get set up in the 1900s? Well, they would get told to go dig a trench without something keeping that trench from collapsing. They die in the trench. Okay, shit happens. They said, hey, we got to unionize. This shit can't keep happening. Same thing. That member can monitor that much safer. Now, instead of having to say you lift 80 pounds a day, we're lifting 30 pounds a day, or maybe 10 pounds a day repetitively, so it's pretty awesome stuff. So, okay. So that's one of the things. So I know you're into doing stuff with batteries too, right? So,
Yes. Do you want to
so
hear the
kind
story?
of, I do want to hear the story. Yes.
All right. Well, one of my first jobs as a young person was working at Sears Roebuck and Company, and I was selling die-hard batteries. Now, to precipice, back then I got $1.50 for every battery I sold. And it was, Irv, the old manager at the shop comes up and goes, Dave, most of these batteries you're selling are still okay. And I'm like, Irv, I know, but I tell the customers the same thing every time. Sir, your battery checked out okay. I do notice it's 4 years old. Just to be safe, I would have some jumper cables on a 40 below night, and I think you're going to be okay. Well, 9 out of 10 times he's thinking I lost 2 hours of work. It's $120. Put that battery in my car.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have my wife worry about it. It was a fear sales pitch. I'm not going to argue.
Yeah.
And as a result, that's what I realized was happening with anybody selling batteries. There's just a certain point where some of us aren't brave enough to keep the jumper cables handy. It's not safe or not a good idea. So they turn that, what I'm going to call gently used car battery in. Well, for 35 years, I've been looking at ways to use used car batteries to store wind and solar power. The problem with that is most electrical engineers will tell you, you can't discharge a car battery 80% like you can a deep cycle UPS battery running your network center. You can only start the car, which is a 10 to 20% discharge. Difference is you can start that car a lot with this type of system. So the problem was, as I looked at it, wasn't so much the size, and granted, it takes about 6 used car batteries to make up for one decent commercial deep cycle battery, but it's free. Everybody said you can't use car batteries. Why buy 6 batteries? My take was, let's use used car batteries. So it turns out the largest car battery recycler in the world is about 10 miles down the street from me. And they recycle about 50,000 car batteries a day. So I realized from there that there was enough scale that we could build these robotic sort systems. And basically, it was kind of the first time I saw a VSU in the industry, a vertical storage unit. And I'm going, they basically, Amazon uses that for storing toothbrushes and toothpaste and things like that. It's just in a tote, and it's in a massive warehouse full of these totes that robots retrieve the totes out of. And I realized we could beef that up and put car batteries in those totes. And we could put hundreds of thousands of these used car batteries into a system, and we could store anywhere from 4 to 60 megawatt hours, depending on the size of the system. And we could build as many of these as we wanted. I think we can build 50 to 100 of them, actually. I think there's that many used car batteries in the US that are viable. Well, my problem, Joe, was it's been 30 years since I sold car batteries. Has it changed? So what I did is I went to Mankato State and I asked them to do a study. I sponsored a study with them to go through Valvoline's used car batteries. And we sorted through the used car batteries of Valvoline, and we found that depending on the time of year, there was somewhere between 17 and 27% of all car batteries turned in are still viable for storing energy. From our calculations to do these 4 to 60 megawatt systems, we knew that we needed at least 7% viable batteries to make it economically work. So the good news is we proved that we're probably above that 7% considerably. The other big concern before I dove into this too far was, can we charge and discharge these batteries enough to make them economically viable? And what that meant was we needed them to last at least 45 days, because on a big system, it would take 45 days to fill it up. You don't want to have to fill it right at 45 days. So what we determined was that you can discharge these batteries, though 85% of them lasted 50 days. We only had 50 days to do the study, so that was the time determinant. Mm-hmm. What they told me was at 45 days, enough of them were still viable that the systems could continue to fill and grow. So now that we have this data that, 1, there's enough used cars batteries to harvest, 2, they will last long enough in a massive storage system to be viable to store wind and solar. Next step now is to build a prototype with the robots sorting, dealing with the batteries, and actually use a system like this. Okay, now the interest. Go ahead.
So I'm actually very interested. Okay, so there's a couple things. first, for my guest, okay, break down that type of storage capacity. Okay, so like what you're trying to build in this prototype, how much
Okay.
try to relate that to something relatable to a listener that doesn't understand this like you do.
All right. So we generate wind and solar power and nuclear power, and particularly wind and solar, we can't put that on the grid all at once. The pipe to enter the grid is too small in most places to put a solar field or wind farm. So what this allows us to do is store a portion of that power so we can use it later and feed it back onto the grid really when we need it. Peak shaving is what we're doing. When everybody turns on their air conditioner at 4 p.m., between 4 and 8 p.m. to cool off the house, that's when the power companies need extra power, and we're trying to prevent them from having to start a coal-fired plant. Now, with the car batteries, how these work is if you would imagine 1,000 car batteries on a shelf and 100 rows of these shelves, we would basically run row number 1 for 30 seconds. We would draw that battery down gently for 30 seconds, 3 minutes, whatever that takes to discharge it to 20, down 20% to 80% full charge. 2 seconds later, row number 2 fires up, 2 seconds, row number 3 on through row 100, basically allows us to provide a stable power source for a city of about 3,000 people. That's the 4 to 16 megawatt, appears to be around 3,000 homes that would power. I think once we get into the 600,000 60 megawatt hour system, I believe the numbers were closer to 30,000 homes that could power for a few hours. And again, we're not trying to really power the city for 4 hours straight. We're just trying to supplement that part on the grid. Basically, this is a giant capacitor for the grid.
I was just going to say, it's nothing more than when you flip on a fluorescent light and you have that ballast or starter. Everybody's seen it where you twist that little thing in your closet light. It's just a big version of that for people that don't understand it.
Exactly. This basically stabilizes our grid. Unfortunately, the US grid is very old. It's not very stable. And what this allows us to do is to not have cascading power station failures. For instance, my system, if we had that down in Texas, and we had a couple of them, so a couple portions of their grid could have remained up and running, which would have kept that cascading power failure that they had. Yeah. Now, Tesla has the same concept out with their wall of power. Are you familiar with that, Joe?
No, actually, enlighten me.
Elon Musk, he has his ideas, take his car battery, put them in a stack in like a sea container. It's a wall of power, and you could run a city, or a town or area on the grid like I'm talking. Drawback to his system is it is very expensive. It uses lithium, which we don't have. We have an unlimited source, but we don't have a good way to mine it and extract it from the earth yet. We need to work on that a little bit. And what I'm hoping is my system prevents us from rushing out to open up new mines. We're a mining robot company, so we're all for mining, but we want it to be intelligent, reasonable access. Let's not rush to market on this and avoid some of the steps we'd like to do normally. So basically the idea is like what happened in Texas is this system could have provided 4 hours of energy for them. And since it was an ongoing problem, my system had capacity where it could have provided another 4 hours. And if it really needed it, it could have provided 4 more hours. And if it really needed it, it could have done 4 more hours of energy, which would have helped them through this crisis. Now, the drawback with used car batteries is if you run them down 80% more than 5-10 times, you're going to wreck your trash. And if you wreck your trash, you've got to get new trash in place. I'm being ironic there. The neat thing is this is a fuse, that capacitor for our grid that I think we really need. One, we should just be intelligently using the energy we have available to us, and it allows us to do that in a very cost-effective manner. We expect my robotic system will run, life of the system will be about 30% of what the Tesla system would be. So significant savings in getting it up on the line, no new mines right off the bat. And this is something we could actually put and build and put in place within 6 to 9 months. We don't need 5 years.
and it's solving a problem with what do you do with the batteries? You know, what do you do with all the old batteries? I mean, there's a
Well,
problem there in itself that's getting solved, right?
so actually, when it comes to car batteries, that's the beauty of this. We already have the lead mines. We already have very strict regulations on recycling, and almost all car batteries get recycled. So they're very environmentally friendly already. All as we want to do is extend the environmental impact so we can use power and use power more intelligently before they get ground up. The value we provide to the recycler is we sort through their batteries. It's very important they pull lithium ion batteries out of their system, because if they grind up a lithium ion battery, it's like a giant bomb and it literally takes chunks of metal out of their grinder. Whereas if you grind up a lead acid battery, it will burst into flames, but it's just fun to watch versus dangerous.
Yeah.
So there's a value stream in helping the recyclers be more efficient at recycling the batteries. And there's a huge opportunity for our planet to give it a break, use energy a little bit more intelligently.
Yeah. No, I mean, it makes perfect sense. And I'm actually, first, I'm really glad I asked you to explain, like,
I hope I did. Did I actually
explain
explain it?
No, you did, because
Okay.
because at first when you asked me if I was interested, I was almost like, I think I'm a pretty smart dude, but I don't even know what I'm interested in. It sounds awesome, but like I need to understand a little more. And then once you said it, like it makes total sense. I mean, to me, it's like I know there was a period of time where everybody was trying to put in these peaker plants off natural gas, and basically the peaker plant was there to cover rolling brownouts and was there to just help boost the grid when it needed it. But you're still burning natural gas, you're still using a natural resource. What you're basically doing is saying, let's store that energy and use it as we need it. And it makes total sense to me. I mean, you don't know this is probably about me, but I'll tell you, like, one of the things that made so storing energy is always great. One of the things that helped us with our success with robotic mowers is I figured out a way to make solar charging stations with marine cycle batteries. So now, as you're saying, car batteries, so like I take 3 marine cycle batteries, 275-watt solar panel, sine wave inverter, and then I have to take that 12 volts that I'm making with those batteries and just put an inverter and turn it to 120 volts, which is what the mower needs, done. And all I'm doing is taking what God or Mother Nature or whoever you want to say is giving us, storing it so my robot can take little gulps of it every hour and a half. You know,
Correct.
You're doing it just on a massive scale for all of the households, taking gulps of energy when the sun is down and air conditioners are not running as much because you're not making heat. Your batteries are all trickle charging. So when the sun comes up and it gets hot in the houses and all the air conditioners start to kick on, you're supplementing, right?
Correct.
What it's doing.
That's in a nutshell. I'm just taking what you were doing with your mowers and doing it on steroids so the entire society can benefit from that technology.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. So that's super exciting to me. I think that's totally cool. I hope that you get to a point where you can set those up, because I think it's brilliant that you guys even thought of it. So kudos to you guys. So okay, so let's
Let me add
obviously we
more.
know where we're at.
So let
Yeah,
me tell you what I found out after I designed this. At least with our local utility, I'll leave them unnamed. We were told last week that the law says they have to produce wind and solar power, but nothing in the law says they have to use it. That's the shocking thing we found out on this. And so basically their response to me was, well, Mr. Neville, since we don't have to use it and we don't need it, we don't need to store it. So fortunately, there's 2 federal laws that hopefully will be passed pretty quickly that bypass that, forcing the utilities to maximize how they use wind and solar. But I'm just shocked that we've designed a robot that will basically help save the planet, and the initial response is, we don't care. So
I actually almost had to hold my jaw up when you said it, because that was a jaw dropper. Like as you were saying it, I was like, this makes 0 sense to me. And it's, I look at the problems that we try to solve and we argue about, and then you have such a simple solution, and it's almost, and then it's a shame, because then it goes back to big corporation profitability. How much money can we make? Like, that's just the first things I start to think of.
Oh,
And
I'll tell you what, my technology may not make it to market because the key players own a lot of stock in gas and oil companies. In fact, we have a professor that we work very closely with designing switching technology to switch power off of solar fields and wind fields. He was telling me that he was working with what they call a microgrid type company, and they had asked the utility to hook up. And he was actually on sabbatical at the utility company while this was going on. And he goes, it was funny that I'm sitting at the customer who's requesting for grid access and hearing their side of the story, and I'm sitting at the power producer and hearing their side of the story. And literally the response at the time was, this was a few years back, was, Joe at the coal-fired plant supplied us for power for 40 years. He's good enough then, he's good enough now. We don't need this microgrid technology. And so therefore they delayed 2 years for that company to be able to test their system. Now, when I'm talking to the power company last week, my whole discussion was, I don't need you guys to endorse it. I just want to know that you'll let me to hook up onto the grid to do this. And it was about 30 minutes of why they can't allow me to hook up to the grid and have access to helping them save and store power. It's just mind-boggling.
so I've started to robotically mow under solar panels at all these solar fields. And it all seems to me like they're kind of private selling back, right? It's like what they're doing. So what if the avenue was just to team up with them, since they're privately held, and you put your storage right there, which is hooked right to the grid anyways?
That's probably, that's kind of what the power company suggested. Basically, I will say that they weren't rude. They were just, when they were dealing with me, very professional, very polite, just trying to give me the lay of the land so I didn't get my expectations up, was really what he was trying to do. His suggestion is anything behind, the meter, which is the solar field, you can do whatever you want. You just can't do anything past the meter. If you can keep it before the meter, we don't care what you do. So we're trying to navigate that. We're trying to look for partners. What we want to do is build a prototype, prove out that this works on a little bit smaller scale before we go to 4 to 16 to 60 megawatts. And all I was asking, will you support a prototype grid access? And realistically and politely, the answer was no. We won't even support your research. So again, hoping the federal laws change that landscape soon. Now, They were really polite. They said, we also own power in another state. If you go to that state, they may be supportive of it. Although they didn't want to give us a contact name in that state to pitch the concept to. So I don't think he knew who it was part of it. But so it's amazing the roadblocks we throw up to making our planet a better place to live on.
So listen, and like I said, this podcast is about you, but this is stuff people we deal with every day. It's why I don't even post this stuff on Facebook, because if it's not a roadblock from like really, really high up, like the 1% of 1% of companies that somehow can roadblock all this, and then you go the other way, which is the people you're trying to help that can't help themselves but to be so negative, such pessimists, that they think you or I are the ones with the angle. Okay, so they don't want to do it because we're just going to be the next evil genius, that's out to screw them, But I can tell you, outside of here, I'm going to send you some emails. I've got a couple of contacts that I think would be ecstatic to hear about this, and they are private companies in this. One of them I have a 176-acre land lease with. And I'm actually trying to team them up with this solar company so that we can build a solar plant, a solar field, since I'm mowing them anyways. It's very collaborative. And this is what I like to do for my podcast, is collaborate. So off the show, I don't want to say any names, so I don't want to piss anybody off, but we're going to talk about that. So tell me more about your background for a minute. Let's everybody that listens to the podcast, they know I dive in to the people as much as the product. Okay. So I like to learn about, what's behind the passion. So tell me about yourself as a young man, and tell me maybe, how you got to where you sit today.
Well, as I had alluded to, fairly young, I started at Sears Roebuck and Company, and I found out I had the gift for gab and was pretty good at sales. I was very fortunate that my manager was a top level executive at the Sears Tower. Late in his career, he kind of drank himself out of that job and got busted down to being my boss. I can't tell you how fortuitous that was. He was a psychology genius. He taught me how people think and how to help them buy, and how, more importantly, his thing was how to help people feel good about the purchases they're making. And so I kind of got to spend 6 years with Sears, kind of crafting my skill, if you will. Got married at 18. My wife was 18. I was 19. Ended up going to UPS because I needed better benefits. I was working at Sears and UPS. Learned a ton about logistics. Found I wasn't the best manager supervisor, so they often threw me in the hazardous material response team training role, train drivers to train role, handle their air routes. I got to do I was like one of 3 people that could do every job at UPS except fly the plane or drive the actual semi truck. So I did that for about 10 years, learned a lot about process, people, and how to become a better manager. I then went into headhunting, and I got to work. I found out I knew a lot more about engineering than I thought I did. And I found out engineers kind of needed a voice. Some engineers tend to be a little more introverted than extroverted, and they really needed, rock stars had an agent, sports athletes had agents. Well, my thing was, if you're going to be an engineer and you want to be a brilliant mathematician, let me be your agent. I'll help guide your career, get you into the companies you want to do. As a result, I got to provide the team that built the railgun for the U.S. Navy. I got to work on a lot of really exciting programs and some really, really cutting edge technology. And as I was doing that, I realized kind of tired of just doing service work. I'd like to make something that went out the door. And that's when I went into manufacturing, got into the firearms thing, learned about machining gears and drives and some other things. Exited that, went into the automation market, and kind of spent some time just deep dive. What's going on in automation? What's happening with robots? And why are we still doing it this way has probably been my biggest thing. I drive Kawasaki nuts because I'm like, I don't want rigid, heavy robots. I want robots that are lightweight. I'm able to move around. I don't need precision placement anymore because I can put cameras, lasers, time and flight sensors. There's so much of this technology I can tie together that I don't need this huge 1,000-pound infrastructure. So I think the next generation of robots will be almost flexible. I don't want to go so far as to say flexible, but don't have to be that rigid repeatability, but much lighter, much cheaper, and more usable around humans at that point. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the cobot, craze has come, and we're seeing, new and interesting ways to get robots to interact with humans. We're still big proponents of the old industrial robots because that's what most of our customers do need. So that's kind of how I evolved into this, is just kind of a passion as a kid for robots. You can see the poster on my back wall. I think the key to that is, if you can't read it because it's reverse, is we are who we choose to be. And, I think we have to, as a society and as a race, we have to choose to want to love and care for each other and make this a better place to live. And I just think automation's one way I can probably have the bigger impact on our society by doing that.
Yeah. So Chris, you better make that his, even though it's a quote up there, but make sure you include that in his micro quote, because that's good. So tell me more about you as a child, though. How many people are in your family? Tell me about your parents.
Okay, typical kind of American family, split family. My mom and dad had 3 kids, got divorced. My dad went on to have 5 more boys with my stepmom, and my mom had another daughter. So I think it's around 9, 10 siblings I have. I literally have to count at this point in life. So, I was a middle child, trying to excel over my sister who was a superstar. And I guess had the middle class, fairly normal life. We didn't have everything we wanted, but we had more than enough. And that kind of gave me the basis. I remember, after my mom got divorced, I remember her being on food stamps, and at 3 years old, being aware that something called a taxpayer was helping me eat. And I think that was formative in the fact that I wanted to be a contributor to society so I could help other kids eat. I'm a big proponent of pay more than your fair share of taxes. Not insane numbers, but I know that there's kids and people who need that. So that was probably a formative thing, is being young and knowing that there was some sort of welfare system, and we didn't let people just suffer in our country. And that kind of drove me to try and choose to be the best person I could as much as I could throughout life.
Yeah, I think it's important you said that, because I think that we lose sight sometimes. People always only want to think of, like, we're the land of the free. What makes America great is we're the land of the free. But you just said something that I want to expand on, is we also don't allow people in our country to suffer, or we don't want them to suffer.
We try not to.
I think it's awesome that you just said what you said about, you had that awareness that there was a period of time where society was helping you eat, and now you want to give back, because at the end of the day, that's just being a good human. Like, you're just a good human being. Like, I can just tell you, talking to you, I just realized you're a great person. So I appreciate that, being a fellow good human. I think I try to live life that way also, and I think we should all try to do that. So great. That's awesome. So then, what did your parents do that? I mean, your mom, you said when she got
My mom
divorced,
was kind of a stay-at-home mom, cleaned houses. My dad was a plumber. My father was a fireman, and a farmer. So I had exposure, and they were both auto mechanics. So, I spent my youth in the garage dodging wrenches,
yeah.
learning that the crescent wrench wasn't an F word, that actually was a crescent wrench.
Yeah. Well, anybody that wrenches on anything knows a crescent wrench is going to break a knuckle somehow or another. You're going to adjust that son of a bitch wrong.
There's be a few expletives that should not be said, but you're going to say them.
Yeah.
So
where did you grow up then? Like, what state?
Minnesota. It's like I was born in Minneapolis, raised in Savage, Minnesota. And
so I don't hear the big Minnesota accent. Sometimes I talk to people in Minnesota, and I can tell they're from Minnesota. I couldn't tell for sure.
I got to throw in a few "yeah, sure, you betchas." You'll get there. I always liked it at SHOT Show and stuff. Oh man, I could hear the accents. You'd throw in the "oh yeah, sure, you betcha." No, we have some fun with it. We don't shy away from the accent if we don't have to. I was raised by a Southern mother, so I have a weird Minnesota accent, because I use a lot of Southern terms, and people in Minnesota look at me like I'm crazy, and I'm like, it's what my mom taught me. What can I say?
Oh, it sounds like you're well traveled then. I mean, I know people say there's a Chicago. Like, I'll talk to some people, and they're like, "Man, I can tell you're from Chicago," and I'm like, "Why?" And they're like, "Because you have a Chicago accent." I'm like, "I didn't even know that existed."
Yep,
but
you have the Chicago accent. It's mellowed. I can tell you've been away for 10, 15 years. Yes, no.
Well, so technically, we're so where I live is like 40 miles west of Chicago.
Okay.
So it's the big city everybody thinks of, but yeah, I'm not. I'm in northern Illinois. I'm like smack dab between Chicago and Rockford is like the second biggest city in Illinois, I think. So but yeah, so
growing up, worked with my dad.
Any sports, anything like that, or no?
What's that?
Any sports? Anything like that?
I played sports as a kid. We had really bad coaches, and I was a late bloomer, so I really didn't tie into sports. I got more into building things and chemistry sets and trying to teach myself as much as I could teach myself as a kid. I just wanted there's two things I wanted to do: learn and make money. And really, it was more like make money and learn was my driving factor as a teenager, if you will.
Yeah. Well, I think that was smart. I think that sometimes we fall into the trap of learn without making any money. And then we don't think about the things we're trying to learn and realize there's no money there after you learn it, but that's something that I think that guidance counselors around the world, or the country at least, should pay attention to that a little. I think sometimes they misguide a lot of kids, but
I was
that's a whole
super
other.
I was super fortunate in high school to have an electronics teacher. I think by 12th grade, I had pretty much finished high school by 12th grade, but I didn't want to graduate because I still needed a couple credits. And at the time I was like, why jump into the job market? I'm already working, making good money already. So I took about 6 hours a day of independent study in electronics. And that's where this teacher brought in this robot that we were able to build. He had a couple arms in the lab, and I learned a lot about how technologies assimilate together, and a little bit of the nuts and bolts on, how volts and watts and resistance work, at least enough to have the conversation to turn it over to the engineer and let them really do the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
So that was probably very formative. Between Sears in high school and my robot teacher, we had a robot club in 1980s, way before robot clubs were even a thing. So that was, I think that helped form me a lot.
Yeah. So then who would you say some of your mentors were that, looking back on it now? I mean, I'm probably assuming that person that you set up the robot with, but and then maybe the guy from Sears that drank himself out of the Sears Tower. But
so definitely my dad and my father were huge mentors to me. They both brought different perspectives. Jim Winehouse at high school with the robot lab was a huge mentor. Bill Forboard from Sears Roebuck and Company was a huge mentor. Since then, just different industry leaders have kind of taken me under their wing and, offered the advices I've needed as I kind of moved forward in my career, and been very fortunate to pay that back by helping other people doing the same thing. I'm very big, and you do whatever you can for the person standing in front of you right then. Don't put it off, don't wait, don't seek it out. But when opportunity arises, try and help those people rise up and become the best person they can be. And as a headhunter, that was, I did that for about 20 years. That was the most rewarding part. Most of my work was pro bono, career advising, and occasionally I got paid to place somebody. That paid the bills.
yeah,
But it was literally the conversations of, no, you've done the right things, or, here's something you want to change slightly, but keep persevering, keep pushing. You can get to where you want to get, be patient, take the time, make the right steps when you're allowed.
yeah. So you said your sister was like the superstar of the family. So
She was the basketball star, the figure skater, she was the athlete of the family at the time.
And is she an older sister or younger?
Oh yeah, she's about 4 years older, so just old enough to be a pain in my butt and for me to be a terror to her. So
so what?
And I have
what
to
is
be
she-
honest, as you mentioned mentors, my sister literally has probably been my lifelong spiritual advisor and mentor to, life. If just how to live and ways to think about living better. Julie Ethan is her name. So
You said Julie or Julia?
Julie Ethan is my sister.
I'll have to maybe look her up. So what does she do? Like now she's in her.
She's a little bit in transition. She, later in her life, her and her husband ran a painting business. So I'll lose the computer here. She works with the Peace Institute out in San Diego, and she's kind of trying to help war zones negotiate humanitarian aid. Let's not capture the young girls and abuse them. Let's remember that if you're trying to take over this regime, you got to lead these people, and you don't want them hating you after. Let's let the humanitarian groups get in and give you medical and food aid so that you're not destroying the civilians that are caught in your path. So she's very dedicated to, like myself, how do we live more effectively on this planet and care for each other in a more intelligent manner? She's crazy. I'm just going to put it out there. She really thinks she's going to do this, and God bless her, she probably will.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you see it? Does she see she's making an impact? At the end of the day, if she feels good about what she's doing, then she's doing it right, I guess. I mean, that's what it
And
comes
she
down
is, and what she does is she's really good at getting dialogues going between the right people. One of the things she shared with me that I think maybe a little off subject, but it's amazing how involved the Catholic Church is in these drug-infested war zone areas in keeping people mildly sane. The despot, the bad guy, they're talking to him directly, and they're trying to keep them from going off the deep end and destroying that society. So she's been involved in some really, really cool stuff. Very proud of her.
Yeah, that's amazing. I was an altar boy myself, so
I was too. So
you were. So you want to see? It's crazy. It's crazy how many people you talk to that were actually altar boys. I loved it. I thought it was awesome. If I was going to go to church, I'd rather be the person that's involved in it than just to be sitting there watching. So I kind of liked it.
it was the only time I could stay awake through the entire service. As if I was.
I agree. I agree. Wow. Now we're really off. But I remember because I was a big kid, so I was always the one that got to carry the cross when you'd walk in and set it, and it was so weird because I don't know if you're still practicing or not, but they kind of changed some of the verbiage, and I used to in my mind I could like almost say a mass because it is very ritualistic if you're a Catholic,
Yes.
And I remember all of a sudden I was like, that's not what they should be saying. Why did they change it? Like anyway, so all right, well, that's really off subject, but kind of cool. Cool tie. So, all right, so to get kind of back to the business side of it. So you said when you came on that your vision is to one day to be able to be out in outer space and mining asteroids and stuff. So I'm interested to know, what's your roadmap on how you're going to get there? Because we all have like these big hopes and dreams about where we can take our companies, So I'm just interested to know because honestly, to circle back, that was one of the most interesting things I've heard from anybody on my podcast since I started this, to say that they want to be doing that, So.
Well, I've developed a couple drive systems that could be used on spacecraft. I haven't brought them to market yet, partially because unfortunately my mind takes all of the technology I develop and figures out ways to make weapons out of them. So I'm cautious as to what I release when I do. And I've been looking at that idea for a while. Really with the robots, we're kind of copycatting some of the other people out there. The largest space robot company in the world is owned by Bezos. And Jeff Bezos has 0 robots in outer space. All of his space robots are in his warehouses. And what he's doing is developing the AI algorithms and stuff so that when he starts to put them into space, he can use them. So we're looking at a parallel path like that. Let's develop these assembly robots, 3D printing robots, mining robots on the terrestrial plane. In fact, we just shipped our first mining project yesterday. So what I'm doing to get there is there's a couple things I've done. One is I'm reaching out to the mining companies in the US, and we're upgrading these 1970s mining robots that they use to reline the mill. So if you don't know what an iron mill is or a gold mill is, it's just a giant drum, way bigger than a cement truck, but very similar in shape and shape and form. On the inside of that drum are these 6 to 8 inch steel plates that the steel balls get carried up to the ceiling, drop down on the ore, and crush the ore. Well, after 6 months, those plates wear out, and they have to put this human-operated robot in there to take those plates out and put new ones on. A lot of people got out of that mill liner business. We're going into it because there's a huge need to repair and replace these. So we're creating relationships with automation and mining equipment with mines because there's only 2 industries on the planet that have a 50 to 100 year outlook. And that's pretty much timber and mining. They plan 50 to 100 years in advance. So what we're trying to do is to provide value for their everyday operations so we learn how mining processes are done here, what types of equipment, and how we're going to take that type of technology and convert it to a zero gravity environment that I can 3D print into space on an industrial scale. Now, when I started the company, we went out to the Naval Research Laboratory and They were kind enough to offer us a $6 billion robot to go up and refuel satellites. And the catch was they wanted me to develop the $6 billion bus to drive their robot around. And I asked them, I said, well, we're in a meeting with about 100 scientists and NASA and NRL, Naval Research Laboratory people. And I asked, I said, well, how long do I have to put the proposal together? And I said, well, 9 days. And I looked at them, I kind of go, oh, so Boeing and Airbus got this under control. And they all laughed. They're like, oh my God, somebody understands how we buy. Dave, we've invited guys like you here today because we want you to support Boeing or Airbus, whoever wins, and make sure they're successful. Well, the really cool thing is after the 4-hour meeting with them, I'm standing in the parking lot ready to go to the airport to fly back to Minnesota. The head of DARPA, if you don't know who DARPA is, it's a Defense Agency Research Program Agency. They're the guys who give billions of dollars to companies like me to develop products like this or ideas. And I asked him, I said, you going to the airport? And he said, yes. I said, I got an Uber coming. You want to ride with me? So I got 45 minutes with the head of DARPA. And he goes, Dave, what did you think of the concept? And I go, God, I don't want to be rude, but your robot's really grossly outdated. Your mathematics are poor at best at this point. And your commercialization plan is probably one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. And he just looks at me, he goes, somebody gets it. Can you come back in 2 years when this contract's over and we can start over? And I'm like, I'm game. I'm still waiting. The 2 years is going to be in about a month or two. And I don't know if we'll still be in on this.
Yeah.
But what they wanted to do is they wanted to refuel satellites in geosynchronous orbit. Well, there's only like 13,000 satellites that need that service. I think it was 1,300. Well, if you drop down half mile into non-geosynchronous orbit, there's like 40,000 satellites that need fuel. And while you're waiting for fueling gigs, we could collect space debris and deorbit old satellites and space junk to kind of clear the way up. So that's one way we'll probably start, is refueling satellites and or deorbiting junk. Maybe we end up getting stuck on the moon. Maybe we end up getting stuck on Mars. Our hope is to get out to the asteroid belt. 16 Psyche is the key asteroid everybody wants. If you don't know what 16 Psyche is, it was the core of a planet. And this asteroid is worth something like $100 billion trillion. They think that it would destroy Earth's economy 10,000 times over. But we probably won't be able to bring the whole satellite back. We'll just bring big chunks of it back as we need. So there's a huge economic opportunity for our planet to be very viable. And through robots, automation, and space travel, we do think the planet could hold 50 to 60 billion people, and sustainably. And we've got to start planning for what the next 10 generations look like on this rock. And quite honestly, if you're like most of us, we probably should have a lifeboat in case we have to leave for a while. Things happen naturally on this planet that are not conducive to life. And it would be horrible if we couldn't wait out a couple 100-year cycle to let the planet settle down and repopulate it. And that's a lot of what drives me on a daily basis is, how do I make enough money? How do I bring in enough customers to hire the right engineers, bring in the right minds, so that 5, 10, 15 years from now, we've set the seeds to make these journeys that I think mankind is ready for.
So where did you go to school? Like explain your education, because honestly, I mean, I talk to a lot of people, and I'm not trying to blow smoke up or flatter you here, but you're a pretty smart dude. So where did you had to learn this stuff somewhere,
So, and not to offend anybody in academia, I got my 2-year degree from a Normandale Community College. Basically redid high school like 4 times before I finally got the math down to get my stupid 2-year degree. Started on my 4-year degree, realized that this was probably not how humans interact in business. I could probably just make this up as I go. And when it came to the scientific technical aspect, I wanted to figure it out on my own. I didn't want people to tell me how it's done. So when it comes to physics and engineering, I'm completely self-taught. And I hate to say it, I make it up as I go.
So don't hate to say it at all. So listen, I got to tell you, like, I mean, as you say it, like I kind of have chills because people, when I tell people that I didn't go to college, I went to a community college for small circuitry analysis. And that was it.
Oh, good basis.
Everything else I've done has been self-taught. Like, and it's amazing to me because you obviously are passionate about what you're doing. And it's amazing that when somebody truly wants to learn something,
You
your
learn it.
brain is like a sponge. It's just like boom, it just comes in. But when the way we do schooling right now, it's like you take somebody and you tell them you have to learn this, and you're like, why? Because you're gonna need it. Well, let me tell you what. I have never used trigonometry. Now, for me, personally, you may because what the stuff you're doing now. But
I wish if I could do trigonometry, I would have finished college.
okay,
I couldn't do the Greek. The
yeah.
Greek
So
was
this
my
is the thing.
Achilles heel.
It's like you look at
Unintended.
this stuff, and at the end of the day, the majority of the math I use is what I can put in a calculator. I input something in a calculator or I put it in Excel. That's the other thing that I always think is funny. It's like, I take Excel or a Google slide, I figure out my columns, make sure that math works, and it's just redundant. It's always there for me as a businessman.
Well, the funny thing is, I was going to go back to college in my 40s to try and master math. And when my daughter went to college, I was going to go back to college was kind of my plan. And I got to that age, and I got to be honest, I looked around at the 12 mathematicians in my lab and go, why do I need to learn the math? They can barely do it.
Well, it actually, so this is kind of funny because I'm a very good speaker, which obviously you are also. And I'm a terrible speller. Okay, it's one of the reasons I don't even know that much. I'm not great at grammar and I'm not great at spelling. And my ex-wife used to give me like when I look at my ex, one of the things that I used to get upset about was I'd write her a love letter and she'd like correct it, piss me off. It's like
But it take a little of the flame away. I mean,
yeah,
come on. Where's the passion, Joe? Come on.
I'm like, hey, you get the general gist, right? Like, who gives a shit, And now I'm the type of person that I always laugh when they show stuff like I don't know if you've seen this on Facebook, but it's like they'll put like the start and the end of a word, and your brain can just figure out what the words are just off of like how many letters are there, placeholders. And I've finally realized that I think really intelligent people, we look at things so quickly, we don't even look at the letters. It's like if I see 3 letters, it's the. Like I'm just gonna like automatically do that because I'm moving very quickly. And now I say I just employ people that are good spellers to proof my stuff. If I make a PowerPoint, I'll send it to somebody that is so proud of their spelling or grammar, and I'll be like, hey, double check me here, and they'll be like,
I do the same thing. Well, to sum up the education part of it, I have a lawyer who is very fond of telling me, Dave, it's a really good thing you never went to university because you would have learned you can never do everything you've done. And that one line from him really does stick with me. And I do find it true. And as I mentor young people, if school isn't your thing, it isn't your thing. But find out how you're going to teach yourself and how you're going to learn to get to where you want to go. It's a harder road to hoe at times, but it can be done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just look at this hour and a half we're spending here together, and I just think about how many people like you're going to inspire. Okay.
I hope so.
You will, because
I'll give you an idea too, Joe. Real quick to interrupt you there. This battery idea, I'm not patenting. I want anybody to steal the idea. I just want our planet improved. Really, what I'd like to do is sell the robots and service the robots. That's the part I want to play in this. But I want the Chinese, I want the Indians, I want any entrepreneur out there who thinks they can get this thing to market to steal this idea and help our country and our planet just be a better place. And, I just think that's very important. What should...
No, it is. Well, I mean, no, it is. It's super important, and I think it's. I mean, listen, if you're getting stolen, you would have talked about it on my desk today. so that just kind of goes to show that you're being very truthful when you say that. And in the reality of it is, patents are only good for until somebody figures out the workaround anyways, so if you're first to market and you get it out there and you're doing it better than everybody else, or you have the system to replace the batteries, at the end of the day, it's even worth the time. I mean, people brought up,
I think you're lagging out of me, Mo.
okay, hold on, we might have to just let me give it
You're
a second.
back. You're back now.
Okay. Yeah. Anyways, sometimes collaboration and just having an idea and finding people to run with it. A patent attorney would tell me I'm wrong about this, but it's worth
No,
it.
no, Joe. Actually, I think most patent attorneys would agree with you. First to market, get it out there. I'm sure there'll be some little secret sauce stuff that we might patent on more of the software back end side, but there's 6 different ways to get around that. We know that. We basically want to be, ideally, hopefully we get the prototype build first to market. And if nothing else, people realize that we're not just a sleepy integrator doing palletizers and cookie packaging and the 10 other things we do every day, but we're looking at the bigger picture, being more creative with how we apply robots and automation.
So I feel like we could talk for 3 hours together. So there's a couple of things I want to find out more about. I heard you say you had a daughter. About your immediate family, like now, you said you got married 18, 19 years old, a high school sweetheart, I'm assuming. Still married? Do you have kids? About that part of your life?
All right, so I married my wife, Andrea, high school sweethearts. We graduated, got married, and had our first kid within one year. So kind of decided that even though we were pretty young, that as we grew up, we committed that we would work with each other till I matured enough to at least her level. 35 years later, she's been stubborn enough to and still waiting for me to mature to her level. Never going to get there. We had a daughter, Alex. Alex has her PhD in occupational therapy. She specializes in training premature babies how to suckle and eat. They have to incite different muscle memory type things in these young babies to help them grow and be more successful. She's been consulting on some different exoskeleton projects to help crippled people be able to walk and regain some, independence in their lives. My son, David, the third, actually works at the robot company here with me. He's one of our technicians. His son, David the fourth, was born on my birthday, took my name, birthday. He's way more cute, way charming than I am. And my wife's birthday is the day.
Chances of that happening?
Oh,
I mean, seriously.
Oh my God.
That's crazy.
That was, I'll just tell you, that was a God moment in my life. I just exited the gun industry. It was a brutal exit, very devastating. And as I was dealing with that, my grandson was born on my birthday. And, you just look at something greater in this universe beyond us, and I believe it's God. And you just say, thank you for giving me this reprieve. It definitely helped me heal so I could move on to this chapter in my life. I've got 5 grandkids, 6th one on the way. My wife is full-time grandma, part-time consultant to me and some of my companies. And I got to be honest, been very blessed in that regard to have these. I'll be honest, our journey in the robot business has been incredibly stressful. It's a lot of fun, but we've had a few setbacks that have been damn near devastating. And going home, and I'm very fortunate that my son and his children live with us. We have a big house and blended family. It works really well. So I get to see my grandkids every night when I go home, and usually get to go to bed with them falling asleep in my arms and carrying them up to their room. And being a very driven parent the first time around, I didn't pay attention to my kids as much as I would have liked. And I feel like I'm getting a second shot at being a better human being and a better father, grandfather as a result. So thank you for asking.
Yeah. You just continue to impress me. You're a dude. I'll say yeah, myself, I have a daughter, she's 20, and then who is my COO, and then my two stepsons work for me also, Ray and Kevin. And then my third stepson is part of the business now. He's doing just weekend resets because he plays baseball and basketball. But yeah, it's pretty cool. Like all of my kids now somehow kind of come to the business, and I actually say it's one of the cool things for us is that it's one of the cool things, but the hard things is to separate that work life from home, because to
I
me, I'm
can't.
always on. It's like, to me, life, like life is work as much as it is family. And you know, I know sometimes for my fiance, like I've got to be a hard guy to be with, because I'm the type of guy where if the phone rings, that's an opportunity and I take it. And sometimes and sometimes I feel like I've got to be better, but I always have to remind her, it's like, you got to take the good and the bad with someone like me. It's like, there's a lot of good that's going to come naturally around me because of what I do. But every now and then I'm going to take a phone call at an inopportune time, and you're going to think like, wow, but so yeah, that's good to know, and that's pretty cool that you get to hold your grandkids and take them up to their room. My mom and dad were very involved with us as kids, but I always say, like, nobody can compete with the grandkids. That's what it comes down to.
So one other thing, Joe, back on the robot subject, that's a little bit more to your background. We're in the process of bringing in a mobile robot company called Robotics, and they're building a pizza delivery robot. And we actually just put together a 17,000 square foot manufacturing cell for doing our robot integration. And we're going to be setting up robotic cells to manufacture their robot so that their robot basically becomes self-replicating. So we're there, Joe. We're 6 months probably from having that online. And
So
what I'm excited,
where's that factory at?
Savage, Minnesota. So if you're in the Minneapolis area,
can I come and would you give me a tour?
yes. In fact, any of your listeners, if you want a tour, reach out, get in touch with us. Happy to give you the 15. I got to keep it to 10, 15 minutes sometimes because we get a lot of people through. Yeah. But we're doing some cool stuff right now. I've got a huge system on the floor packaging these breakfast kits for kids, which kind of goes back to me being a kid wanting to eat. I'm very excited to do that. This robot system for the breakfast kits will do 39 recipes, meal kits, snack kits. Basically, we take a bowl of cereal, we take a juice box, we take crackers, applesauce, spoon, put that into a kit for them, or beef stick, cheese sticks, whatever they want to order for these kits. Along that, we're setting up these robot cells to start manufacturing these mobile robots. I'm excited about it because I want to use them for industrial use. Think warehouse management type, moving material around. If we look at our competitors' robot, it's about 45 grand. We think this one's going to debut next year at $25,000. And this is just it's incredible what they're able to do. I'm trying to keep from going full AMR and using more, let's keep it simple to running on the tape on the floor and keep the cost down. Mm-hmm. But we'll have the full AMR module bolt on to it that you can upgrade it whenever you want. And the beauty of that technology that they're developing is we can put that on mowers, we can put it on snow blowers. It's really starting to come around, Joe.
Yeah, so I am so excited. I'm gonna say this because some people listen, they leave me feedback saying they feel like it's like an episode of Shark Tank because I do stuff like this. So it's like, if you can make me a machine that can automatically plow snow and clear snow, oh my gosh, I would be over the moon ecstatic, because it's a $25 billion industry that people don't even think about. I mean, you're in Minnesota, so it's there.
We think about snow a lot of the months out of the year.
And we cannot find, I mean, this is coming from an industry guy, you cannot find anybody that wants to stay up all night. And what I always tell people is the automation doesn't have to replace the worker. What the automation needs to do is do the work in the off hours, okay? When the Costco's are closed, when the stores are closed, let that automation do things then and be able to flip a button so that then the person can come in during the day when the people are around and do it, you know?
You're 100% correct there. And for us, really what we're trying to do with this automation and robotics, again, isn't replace that person, but get more throughput. If, you know, like yourself, you're trying to do snow removal. You can't hire enough people, so you need to get more out of the people you have.
Yeah.
This robot will, as much as it'd be cool to have drones deliver packages to us, as long as I own a shotgun, that's probably not going to be a viable industry.
Yeah.
I'm just going to throw that out.
Well,
there.
and the amount of energy it's going to take to lift that. Like I just had somebody on that does, if you listen, actually it'll probably be right out before this episode, looking at the way it'll get edited, but Tom had a drone that would drill pins or help locate for solar fields, talking about how everybody's connected, right?
Yep.
But then he realized the amount of energy it took for him to take a drone, lift it, land it, lift it, land it, and the safety concern, he realized, wow, it takes hardly any energy to put something on wheels that weighs 20 pounds and move it around, you know? So back to what you were saying, the drone thing
throughput.
Exactly.
Well, like for us, what I imagine these mobile robots that we're building, UPS, FedEx, Amazon will be one of my biggest customers. Because I can put 2 of these robots on the back of a FedEx truck. They set the package on the robot, scan it. It knows exactly where to take it and drop it. It's been pre-programmed. These robots will be accepted because there's going to be a driver in the loop. If there's an issue with somebody stealing the package or the robot runs up on a bush, somebody's there in 2-3 minutes dealing with it. But spending 10 years with UPS, what I understood was if I could just increase a driver's throughput by 15%, it is a huge multi-$100,000 savings a year to UPS.
Mm-hmm.
Because while the normal route doesn't cost near that much, what UPS, FedEx, and Amazon fight is what I ran for UPS, which was called exception driving. Package got missed, too many packages on that route for that driver this day. By automating that and getting that additional 15-20% throughput in the day for them, keeps them from putting an entire another driver on the route. And that's what costs them a ton of money, is when they have to add that second driver to the route for a day or two here and there and never be able to plan for it. I'm going to have a $25,000, $50,000 solution that gets way more throughput on that driver, way less congestion and traffic on a street, and it gets that driver in and out of that neighborhood a lot faster. So
yeah, you're just adding, I mean, so I always say with what we do with automation is we add the human element to automation, and you're adding automation to the human element. It's basically you have a driver that's already the human element we're used to. All you're going to do is enable that driver to make more deliveries quicker and not have to run from door to door, door to door, door to door. You pull up. I mean, like I look, as we're talking right now, I've seen Amazon pull into my neighbors. UPS just pulled up, and probably all of us are getting packages. Sounds to me like what your technology would do is the guy would pull to the end of the cul-de-sac, boom, all the packages go out, and then he's figuring out the next cul-de-sac or street he's going to pull into. They all come back in, get on the truck, and they do it again, right?
Yep, and then he's taking care of that exception package, or got to have the signature. He's doing what that human needs to do then, and we're letting the robot do what a robot can do. And I think the problem with most people in automation is they try and solve every problem completely. And I think me and you, we take that approach of how do we keep that human in the loop and get better throughput for the human and the robot.
Yeah, well, and what I have to say, and this is, you're not a guy that needs to hear it because we're on the same wavelength already, I realize. But, you know, when I'm talking to landscapers, and for the people that listen all the time, sorry you keep hearing it from me, but there are people that maybe will only tune into this episode, is if you look at a current landscape trailer, there's a weed whipper, an edger, hedge trimmers, usually a 60-inch zero turn, and then a 36-inch walk behind and a 22-inch push ball. We've been using different tools to do different jobs, but now there's automation, and people are like, I'll buy the robot when it can weed whip and cut the grass. And it's like, hey, dummy, that's never going to happen. And you're basically you're the barrier. You are making this barrier of, well, if it's automated, it has to do it all. We haven't had a tool that does it all ever. I mean, that's like saying you're going to use a sledgehammer to put in a finish nail. It's a different tool for a different job. Use the automation that we have. It'll make your life easier, right? That's what it is, you know?
Totally agree.
Yeah. So the to I guess kind of get us to kind of like to a point where we can kind of wrap this, I suppose, because like I said, I could talk to you for hours. I'm actually, just so you know, I'm not normally verklempt. I'm like skimming through the questions because this is like flown so good. It's been so free flowing that I'm actually trying to catch up on where we left off because we're just basically having a conversation, which is also like a podcast dream, but a nightmare at the same point to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Oh, it's just a nightmare for the editors. Otherwise, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I'll see if the editor is getting his, you know, I'm paying his worth here. So, have you had any business regrets? You know, you said you had a couple of things that were almost devastating. Did those regrets really help you re-pivot, or it just is what it is? You know.
You know, I hate to be passe, but you just get to. I've been successful and I've failed, and I've been successful and I've failed, and as a serial entrepreneur, once you get through that iteration a couple times, it never gets better, but you always realize you're going to probably come out of it and you'll figure out something else if it doesn't work. I do really expect that this is kind of my apex of my career, that, you know, I'm in robots. I don't see leaving this field at this point. I think I'm able to contribute at a fairly high level. I think I can inspire others in the industry to become better at it and more try and keep that human element to a very non-human industry. In fact, here's an analogy. I exited staffing, working with scientists and engineers, because it finally got to an automated point where I no longer talked to my customers and I rarely interviewed my candidates. I just knew everybody. Customer called me up, says, I need a scientist to do this. I told them I think I can have someone there on Monday in 4 weeks. And I'd make 2-3 phone calls, send out an email. Do you want to go work do this project for me? And I'd get an email back. Yep. What's the rate? I'd tell the customer, and the customer would just say, have them start. And when I started out, it was interview, meet, coffee. You know, it was social. It was people. It was interacting. And what I found out is, at least my bigger clients like Lockheed Martin and General Dynamics and stuff, they just knew I was going to supply the right guy, gal. They didn't question. They knew if there was a problem, I would just deal with it. I had to fire the guy or tell him to quit spitting at people or whatever it was on the rare occasions they misbehaved. But what I found out about robots is everybody wants to talk about robots.
No, you're
There's
totally
more
right.
people interaction around robots than there was selling people.
Yes.
How dichotic, how incredibly dichotic is it that robots are more personally interactive than people have become?
So listen, every customer I have that I have a robot at their house or their business, even mowing grass, they name them. They actually come up with names. One of my customers calls his Albert the Eighth. I've heard Casper and Bob and Snips and King Cuts. You know, I mean, people come up with like all these different names because I look back. I mean, even the beginning of my podcast is the Jetsons theme song, because we grew up watching, being like, how cool would it be to have robots, you know, and there is something cool about them, you know. Now, some people do the whole, have you ever watched Terminator and to see what's going to happen with all these robots, you know, but like, you know, at the end of the day, you brought up how many people could live on this planet, okay? And the type of infrastructure you need to support that. And we all have this dream of like some of us were just crazy. You and I, you seem like the type of guy you're going to work till you die, because that's the way I feel. Like I'm always going to want to do something. Okay. But there are others that have this idea of, man, how awesome would it be to be able to work 20 years and retire or whatever? Well, listen, automation gets us there. You know, automation gets the majority of the workforce doing simple things to keep the automation working and retire early, because the corporations will have a lot more money between increased throughput, less workman's comp claims, all these benefits. to be able to say, hey, I can start to offer you benefits. It's one of the things that I'm realizing as a landscaper. By automating my process, I have way more money to give to my employees.
Well, and as an entrepreneur and a business owner, we all know the number one thing that keeps us from growing is the ability to offer reasonable healthcare benefits to our employees.
Yes.
That's the biggest thing broken in business right now. And even as a startup, we're struggling to figure out how to offer better benefits to attract better talent.
Yeah.
And man, is that a broken system that some severe automation could come in. More on the probably software side of things, but yeah, people don't realize that 80% of our healthcare cost is dictated by the health insurance companies.
Mm-hmm.
So in Minnesota, it's illegal to be a health insurance company unless you're a nonprofit. Well, what people don't know is the board of directors of that nonprofit own a for-profit company that owns every stitch of carpet, pencil, computer, desk. They rent storage space by the byte, not the terabyte, the byte, to the nonprofit. And those companies make billions of dollars. But to the nonprofit, it just shows that they're doing their job.
Yeah.
And what they don't know is, what most people don't get is, if you got rid of all the health insurance companies, healthcare would drop almost 80%. So when we talk about something crazy like a single payer government system with all the corruption and crap that's going to go along with it, well, with an 80% headroom, we could probably pull off something. Now, between me and you, I see that working for about 10 years until it becomes so corrupt, free enterprise has to take back over. But once we reboot the free enterprise system, hopefully we'll come together. I don't think the next healthcare system we bring into this country is going to be the solution. It'll help short term, but it'll help us long term put the right solution into place.
Yeah.
And
well, and it's obvious if anybody even looks at their bill when they get it, as they charge you $2,500, but then the insurance reduces it by $1,600, and then this goes to your deductible, you owe $72, and it's like, holy shit, like, what the hell? And the other thing, to go on to non-for-profits, I always get a kick out of that, because most people don't realize your robot company could be labeled as a nonprofit, as long as there's no profits retained at the end of the year. It's got to go somewhere. It's got to pay out to somebody. It doesn't make a difference. So I always think it's funny when people are like, oh, but they're a non-for-profit. And it's like, but do you even understand?
All that means is bigger, if you're doing it right, bigger bonuses, outrageous paychecks, if you're doing it right.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, let's be honest, if you're doing it naughty, wrong, a little bit.
If you're just knowing how to play the system, that's what it is.
That's all it comes down to. There's actually a research company in town that's a not-for-profit, and I just laugh at her because I watch the Escalade and the BMW and the Mercedes-Benz, the different $100,000 SUV she drives to every event. And I'm going, and how are you not for profit?
Yeah. Well, listen,
but she'll tell you the profit goes somewhere.
Yeah. Well, and listen, there's been years where I asked my attorney, my landscape company's an S Corp, and I'm like, holy shit, I should just label myself a not-for-profit, because I've had several years in a row where you look and you're like, I didn't make shit this year, but I'm still considered an S Corp, but at the end of the day, the books look like I could have switched that year, So,
well, what I always found amazing is as a staffing company, I would generate $700,000-800,000 a year in payroll taxes for the U.S. government. And after paying myself very well and then paying taxes on what I got paid, maybe I got to retain 40 or 50,000. Not even 10% of what I generated for the government did I get to keep. Mm-hmm. 10%, if I could have kept it, would have been wonderful.
Yes.
But how is our tax system so that, as the entrepreneur, of course, you take all the risk, and then that's that phantom profit at the end. Well, you made $80,000 going, okay, I owe 20 grand to the bank. So where's the 80?
So that's funny you bring that up too, because I always try to not get political, but this is one of the things where somebody runs for politics and everybody wants to see their tax return. And everybody wants to know that the person's paying a lot of money in taxes. Like, I don't understand. We have this stigma. And I'm always like, listen, if you're an entrepreneur and you have payroll, you have employees, first of all, you are paying a lot of money in taxes, okay? Because most people don't even understand that when they get a paycheck and let's say $300 comes out of their paycheck for taxes, the employer is paying another $300 Okay, it's a 50-50 split, at least in Illinois. That's how it is for me.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's a 50-50 split. So, and I always think our school system, this is like something that we should teach in schools is, hey, the person you work for pays your other half, because they would make people respect the entrepreneur or the whatever business a lot more when they realize, like, hey, they're actually splitting my taxes. I'm not paying full boat.
My favorite is you get, I'll pay an employee $100,000, and they'll come up and they go, I should get a $50,000 raise. And I'm like, why? And they're like, well, I made you 200,000 last year. And I'm going, yeah, let's just be really clear. You lost about 80 grand over by the time I paid for your office, all the software you had to use.
Yeah.
But in their mind, they got 100. They aren't thinking that it cost you 130 to keep them on the payroll. And then let's be honest, the burden rate to pay my salary, pay for the rent, pay for the material, the software licenses, if you're not making, whatever you're making, if you don't think you're making at least 4 times for your employer, you probably don't have good job security.
Yeah.
And I think that's the simple thing they could teach kids in school is figure out how you're 4 times as valuable to the company as what they cost to have you there.
Yeah, well, and that's actually an easy way to do the math, because I was actually going to say they should teach that in school also, because everybody thinks they're making people like filthy rich, and it's one of the reasons why in my industry why there's this terrible cycle of you get an employee really good and trained up, and then they get that feeling of, man, I'm making you too much money, and they jump ship, and then they already have a vehicle they drive to work in. So they start doing, for landscaping, they start landscaping out of that truck. And they're like, yeah, see, I was making Joe way too much money. I'm getting way more money. Joe, they have to start to buy their own shit. And then once they have to start to buy their own shit, then they're like, how the fuck was Joe making any money? Because that's what it is, because that's what they don't understand. But anyways, we're opening up a whole rabbit hole with that. So
Joe, thank you.
I think that I just will tell you, this was a great interview. I actually hope we talk a lot more in the future.
Anytime.
I'm going to take you up on this pizza delivery thing. And actually, I've got a bunch of pizza owner friends too, 2 of which I hope are listening to the podcast, because they also are trying to figure out they can't hire enough cooks right now at their establishment. So literally, I've been sending them stuff on LinkedIn about companies that have the stuff to make a pizza, and so they're going to be very interested in this podcast.
So I got to put a plug in. Soft Robotics, great for handling pizza dough. We can use a cobot to grab the dough, run it through the ringer, get it onto the platter. Placing sauce isn't that bad, and placing cheese isn't too bad. What we do find is it's a little bit easier if the human puts the toppings on the rest. Because it's a mix.
Well, even if they can take some of the equation, this is like what I tell them all the time, is if you can take some of it out of the equation, you're in good shape,
And we do have a customer that we're designing a fry robot for frying fried foods. So there's a couple people out there working on it. We're working with another customer on that. And so, there's the cool thing about automation is, of course, the saying in automation is, give me enough space, time, and money, we can automate everything.
Yeah.
And I do find that true.
Yeah, no. And I think, hopefully, maybe we make this like a yearly thing, you can get on and you can tell me about, I actually want to learn more about this rock everybody's looking for, and you can keep me updated on that. So, but
well, NASA is actually going out to survey that asteroid in 2023.
Really?
So they're specifically going out to 16 Psyche, and they're trying to figure out how much gold, platinum, boron, what are they figuring? Zinc and nickel, a lot of nickel, a lot of iron. So it's going to be kind of cool to see what they come up with. And just about the time they finish the survey, there'll be a huge race to see who can get there and claim it.
How far away is it, by the way?
It's just beyond Mars. So so it's going to be a journey, and this is going to be different types of propulsion systems we're going to use. There's going to be, we'll be basically building hybrid ion drives, and that's kind of the technology I've been working on. I think this is going to be a perfect opportunity to use sales, because we're not going to be in a hurry to get it back. It's going to be a systemic return to the planet with the ore. So we can use some of these more far out technologies that, Bill Nye just did his solar sail and it worked. Whether or not we can put that on an ion drive and do a little better is going to be great. It just, what I want to do really reminds me of that song, Space Trucking. We're basically going to be creating a trucking firm between here and the planet Earth, or the planet Earth and the asteroid belt. So,
Yeah. I'm telling you, dude.
That's kind of the ultimate goal. Guys, if I get stuck in the stratosphere, okay, that's still pretty cool.
No, totally.
Failure is an option, and we're gonna push failure as far away as we can.
Yeah. Well, something tells me you're not going to fail. Something tells me that you'll be out there doing something, and I'll get to say that I talked to you while you were dreaming it all up. So
check out infinityrobotics.com. We try and post up there on YouTube, and then I'm very active on LinkedIn. If you really want to be a part of it, reach out to me on LinkedIn and tell me you saw me on the podcast. I'm starting to get closer to 10,000 max likes on LinkedIn. So tell me you saw me on the podcast, and I will accept you so you can kind of follow our journey.
Awesome. Well, like I said, I appreciate your time. And
thanks, Joe.
I look forward to talking more in the future.
Me too. Right. Exciting. Good things, guys. Everybody, good day.